Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and well, we got somebody that's going to help us maybe get a little our hands around what's going on with this government shutdown. I am really honored to have with us today C. Edmund Wright. He is an author and a columnist. He has a book out called How Karl Rove and the Establishment Lost Again. And we want to talk to him about his recent article in the American Thinker called The Audacity of Bureaucrats. And I also understand, Edmund, that you do a little writing with Rush?
Well, that's kind of a long, confusing story. Let's not go there right now. Let's talk about other stuff.
Well, my only claim to fame is I used to manage a radio station that Rush got a start at in Sacramento, KFBK.
I think your ties are stronger than mine. So.
Nice to have you with us. Well, the audacity of the bureaucrats and the battle goes on. What do you think's going on?
Well, I wrote The Audacity of Bureaucrats because I think that there's plenty of blame that's being given to the Obama administration, and probably Valerie Jarrett and the rest of the people, at the top levels, ordering the Park Service and other federal bureaucrats and other federal rent-a-cops, if you will, to shut down parks and monuments and beaches and oceans and all of this absurd stuff. But I think blame, Perry, also needs to be focused on the very people who would carry out such an order. I mean, I'm sorry, is a $50,000 salary and a government retirement really worth committing crime against your fellow citizens, including World War II veterans, just to prove a tantrum, a point based on a tantrum from a president? I think these people need to be held accountable, and we can't really hold them accountable, legally and technically, but we can certainly recognize the nameless, faceless, unaccountable bureaucrats hiding behind badges and cubicles in enforcing some of these preposterous shutdowns.
Well, we saw them. I mean, it was just ridiculous. First of all, there's no need to have some of these barriers up around the monuments. And then we have armed people escorting people out of, say, Yellowstone and other I mean, what in the world have we turned into?
Well, it's a bizarro, upside-down world, Perry. I mean, think about it. The government shut down, or 17% of it shut down, supposedly, based on saving money. So what sense does it make to actually spend more money to shut down an open-air facility, whether it's a monument or an ocean or a channel or a hiking trail or the Grand Canyon? They're spending more money just to make a point, to throw a tantrum, and to try and make a political point. And it's really, I think, backfiring on them, which is very heartening, quite frankly.
Yeah, I saw today where the ratings now, 60% want everybody thrown out. So those numbers are kind of interesting. Well, let me ask you this. We're in this mess today. Is it really over Obamacare? Is this the bottom line reason we got to where we are?
Well, there's a number of factors, Perry, but that's the single biggest factor. We are where we are today because John Boehner had an alien abduction and was replaced with someone who actually has testosterone and a spinal column. Now, this happened only because Dr. Ted Cruz showed how it needed to be done a couple weeks ago, and that was all about Obamacare. So, yeah, there are a lot of things going on, but Obamacare is the biggest one.
All right. Now, you hit a real nerve because I used to be chairman of the Oregon Republican Party for 4 years, and I can tell you the infighting between the establishment and the conservatives is huge, and now it has manifested itself on a national scale. Where do you think this is going to go, Edmund?
Well, we've actually gone further than I would have predicted a couple of weeks ago. Frankly, I was very heartened by Ted Cruz's performance and by the support he got. Very heartened that Marco Rubio decided to join him. And you may say that Marco was just trying to get on the good side of people after the immigration disaster. So be it. I'm beyond needing pure motives here. I just want the right things to be done. And for whatever reason, John Boehner, so far, and maybe I should check the Drudge Report here in a minute and see, but so far he's doing the right thing. And I actually like this strategy of kicking the debt ceiling down the road here for 6 weeks or whatever so we can focus on the shutdown / Obamacare. Normally, I would never want to kick the debt ceiling down the road, but you have to pick what hill you're going to die on. And I think the Obamacare / continuing resolution shutdown hill, it's one that we're winning. And I think that's the one we need to focus on right now.
All right. Now, so if they go down this road, now obviously that's the proposal that's on the table. The president could reject this, but on the other hand, here comes the 17th, and the president's going to have to do something. Do you think he'll take it?
Well, the reason I really like this strategy is I don't think he can reject it. You know, he was the one, and the Democrats that are elected and the Democrats who pretend to be journalists, you know, they were the ones trying to give us the end of the world scenario on the debt ceiling to begin with, when it really isn't that. So the Republicans have given them a way out. They almost have to take it. That's why I really like this strategy. I'm not used to saying the Republicans on Capitol Hill are doing the right thing, but I kind of think they are right now.
Wow. All right, let me kind of skip around a little bit. What's your take on the president meeting with the conservative journalists? I mean, what's coming to that? Because I'm hearing all kinds of stuff with that one.
No, my take on that, I'll have a take on that. My take on that is that they're not conservative. I mean, Charles Krauthammer has drifted further away from the conservative base understanding of what America's about. You know, been inside the Beltway far too long. Paul Gigo's never been a conservative. Kathleen Parker's nothing but the liberal media outlets' fake conservative of the day. Byron York has sort of drifted toward that establishment mindset. Those weren't conservatives, Perry. Those were so-called conservatives, and they were brought in to fire a warning shot across the bow of the Tea Party movement. If he really wanted to talk to conservatives in the media, he would have called up Rush Limbaugh and Mark Levin and Glenn Beck and you know, Sean Hannity and people like that. He wouldn't have called in, you know, Paul Gigot and Kathleen Parker, who probably don't even have 1% name recognition, let alone conservative credentials.
Yeah, okay, that was an obvious one. All right, am I hearing you?
You're saying it's just obvious.
Yeah. Am I hearing you say it? And I'm beginning to lean that in the long run, when this thing is all done and behind us, the conservatives win. I think they do win. Do you?
Well, you know, Perry, you and I share a certain worldview, and what we really consider the ultimate long run, it perhaps may have nothing to do with United States politics, and the conservatives will win there eventually. But, you know, what I would say is I think we can win this short-term battle, and I think it will propel us to a victory in 2014. And I'm not saying, by the way, that Republicans winning a lot of seats in 2014 cures everything. It doesn't. But what I would submit to you, Perry, is that if Democrats win the House and keep the Senate, we're done, period, by definition, because Obamacare will become fully implemented. The free market will cease to exist as we know it over a period of years, short years, by the way. So I'm just focusing, I think, on trying to get through 2014 and hope that when I wake up on November 7th or 8th or whatever it is, on 2014, that I feel like we'll still have a country in the year 2015.
Do you think the McCains and the Grahams and the establishment will continue to isolate the Cruzes and the Rubios?
Well, let's wait and see which side Rubio eventually falls down on. But yes, they will. I think I've actually seen them back off a little bit. You know, McCain, what was it, yesterday or day before, actually publicly apologized for his wacko bird comments. Yeah. Understand, and I've been writing negatively about McCain since 1992, so I want to take a little credit for being way ahead of the curve on that one. Okay. I mean, this is a guy who's only interested in McCain. He's also lived off the private sector by marrying into money that he has no understanding of how it was actually earned, as well as the government, you know, teat, so to speak. But I think he and Lindsey Graham have learned some lessons here in the last few weeks. By the way, Lindsey Graham has some generic polling that makes him look eminently defeatable in South Carolina. And there's three interesting candidates, one of whom is particularly interesting in that race already. So wow. I think the days of McCain and Graham being a big story are numbered.
What do you think is going to happen with the IRS scandal?
Well, I hope that the IRS scandal will be tied at the hip, as it should be, to Obamacare, since Lois Lerner and the wonderful folks just like her will now be enforcing Obamacare, I guess along with the Gestapo Park Service. But anyway, I hope that the IRS scandal / Obamacare are joined at the hip, as they should be, for the 2014 elections. I hope that's what the 2014 elections are about, because I think that's a very teachable moment. I mean, besides the overt politics, I think that things like the IRS scandal and the park closures and Obamacare's disastrous rollout, Perry, I think these are the things that can kind of turn low information voters into maybe a little bit higher information.
Okay. You know, it appears to me, though, at the bottom line, with all this nonsense going on, this president, clearly, in my opinion, he's abusing powers beyond anything we've ever seen and stealing America, the core of America, the good part of America, right out from underneath us in broad daylight.
Man, you just gave me goosebumps, and I'll tell you why. My book, How Karl Rove and the Establishment Lost Again, which was released last spring, seems to be an overtly political book, and it is. It talks about the failings of the Republican strategy, or establishment strategy. What I say, though, Perry, in the book on numerous occasions to speak to your point, is that the real story is that America is being stolen in broad daylight. It's the grandest larceny ever. It's the most perfect crime ever. There's a union, bureaucratic, governing elite, Ivy League class that is literally stealing the country from the producers and giving it to their selected cronies and those who refuse to produce. And it's happening in broad daylight, and it's happening inside the cubicles of unnamed, unaccountable bureaucrats, not only in the federal government, but across government at every level. And what the Republican establishment like McCain, Graham, Boehner, all too often miss is this theft going on. But Perry, obviously, you know, you've noticed it, and that's the real underlying thesis of the book.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, my friend. I'm sorry we running out of time. We'll get you back. Keep up the good work. And those who want to follow you, go to the American Thinker and look at the Audacity of Bureaucrats. And where else can they correspond with you?
Well, they can certainly find me at firekarlrove.com. And I also write for Breitbart as well as American Thinker. And Twitter and regular website with my name, C. Edmund Wright. You can find me pretty much anywhere. But visit firekarlrove.com. I think that's a great first place.
All right. Hey, keep up the good work. Talk to you soon.
Very thanks. My pleasure.
All right. God bless. All right. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Well, I hold in my hand a book that I think that could be a real resource for you. It's Max Lucado's new bestseller, You'll Get Through This, Hope and Help for Your Turbulent Times. And earlier I had a chance to talk to Max about this book and some other things, so join me as we talk to Max Lucado. Well, today I have the opportunity and the honor to interview somebody that really needs no introduction, and that's Max Lucado. And I'm sure at one time or another you have read one of his books, and so many of them have ministered to me. And I was just talking to him off camera. 316 was one of those books, but now I hold in my hand a book I think you're going to see and have as a real resource. It's called You'll Get Through This, Hope and Help for the Turbulent Times, a book that Max has authored that deals with the story of Joseph in the Bible. So, Max, what a delight to have you, my friend.
Well, Perry, thank you. It's a great honor to be on your program and share this time with you.
Did you write all those books behind you?
I haven't even read all these books.
Hey, this latest book is really a treasure. What made you to go into the life of Joseph to pull this out?
Well, I've been a pastor now for over 30 years, and just like any other pastor, I talk to people quite often who are passing through difficult times. And the story of Joseph has, for me, always been a go-to story to help people get through tough times. And so it just seemed right, you know, that I wanted to create a book that would help people when they're facing challenges with an inspirational and theologically sound explanation. And Joseph is that person, and Joseph is that story.
Do you think it's interesting that here we have more technology to get the gospel out today, and especially in America? I mean, we have Christian radio and television and some of the greatest authors, yourself being one of them, in the world, and yet Americans are facing harder times than ever before. Have you seen that increase?
Yeah, I don't know if we can say there's more struggles. That you look back through history and you see some generations and times people faced unsurmountable struggles. But I think what's different is our understanding of God, our lack of understanding. On one extreme, we have secularism that dismisses God. And so that worldview says any kind of struggle is just random. There's no control. There's no solution. On the other extreme is a view of God that says God failed. If there's struggle, that means that God failed or he didn't do what I wanted him to do. So this person is disappointed with God. This person has no God. And so I think those two streams of thought are circulating in our society. We don't really have a good theology of tough times. We don't have a good theology of suffering. And I think we need one.
Well, the scripture says there's a fellowship in suffering.
That's right. And there's fellowship with God through suffering. There's fellowship with each other through suffering. But what the Bible teaches us is that there is a God on the throne. He is still sovereign. He's not blind to the struggles. He's not baffled by our struggles. Just the opposite. He uses our struggles to advance his cause. This was the promise of Joseph when he said to his brothers, you intended evil, but God meant it for good. This is the promise of the New Testament too. So this is a steady theme that we have to give people who are passing through tough times.
All right. Do all of these tough times have something in common? And I don't want to minimize any of those pains because they are genuine and severe in their individual cases. But is there a commonality among tough things?
There are some commonalities. Tough times come from one of two sources. I'm not saying anything no one knows. Some of them we had nothing to do with. You know, it may be a genetic disorder, disease, car wreck. Some of them we brought on ourselves through misbehavior, poor decisions. But regardless of their source, their consequence can be despair. That's what this message is about. This book is a war on despair. The goal of this book is to help people have enough hope to get them through the tough time. Despair is when we make bad decisions, make the wrong assumptions, and turn to the wrong sources for help. Despair makes bad situations even worse. Despair says, I'll never get out of this. Despair says the shouting will never stop, the debt will never leave, the addiction will never minimize, the storms will never pass. That's just not true. That's just not true. And we can come in and help somebody who's in the middle of a dark time with not a flippant word of hope, but a word of hope that's grounded in Scripture. And that's exactly what people need to keep them from making bad decisions and to get them out of despair.
All right, so you selected Joseph as your character to glean from. What do you want us to get from him? Because it's a unique life, to say the least. And
it's a great life because we have the whole life of Joseph, pretty much, you know, from as a teenager all the way through the end of his life. Two or three things that I think are huge about Joseph. One is that he himself understood the purpose of suffering. At the end of his life, he told his brothers, you intended evil, but God intended this for good. You intended evil. So look what he's saying. He's saying, look, there's evil in the world. There's actually a philosophy that says if God was good and God was God, there'd be no evil. Well, that wasn't Paul's perspective, wasn't Joseph's perspective. There is in Scripture the acknowledgement of evil. But there is always this conviction that God trumps evil. In fact, the Scripture in Joseph's case says that God takes that evil and he reweaves it. He reuses it for something good. Now, there's nothing in the Bible that would say being sold by your brothers into captivity is good, or being falsely imprisoned is good. There's nothing in the Bible that says cancer is good, or the death of a child is good. What the Bible says, though, is that God can take all of those and he can work them together so that ultimately good happens. And that's what Joseph said. God took that evil and he used it to saved the world from a famine, and he also used it to rescue Jacob and his sons and their extended family from barbaric Canaan, bring them into protective custody in Egypt, where they could grow from a tribe of 70 Bedouins into a nation of 1 million when it was time for them to return to the promised land. So the individual things were tough, but the collective result was good.
All right, we can look at Joseph, see that he got through this. In fact, he went on with incredible humility on the other side of that experience, because sooner or later his brothers came to him for corn, and he humbly served them. But what was it in Joseph from the beginning that gave him that resolve, that when he faced that tough time, he was able to go through it? Because so often, as you know as a pastor, Christians get hit with tragedy suddenly, and all of a sudden the bottom falls out, and they don't even know if they believe in God anymore.
What's unique about Joseph's story is that from the beginning, he believed that God had a dream for him. He is called Joseph the Dreamer for a reason. He walks into the story of Scripture, telling his brothers that he had this dream and that they were going to all bow down to him someday. Well, that doesn't go over well with the brothers. Then he tells the father and one of Jacob's wives a similar dream. So whether you like the fact that he told his brothers the dreams or not, whether we even know how to interpret the whole idea of God speaking to us through dreams, here's what we know. Joseph believed that God had a dream for him. And when he went to Egypt, that's all he had. His brothers took everything else. His brothers took his resources. His brothers took his clothing. His name didn't mean anything in Egypt. Even his profession. The Egyptians looked down on shepherds. So he didn't have anything going for him when he got to Egypt except this one fact. He believed that God had a destiny for him. I talk to people who are passing through tough times. After I hear what they're going through, I'll try to turn the conversation just a little bit by saying, now, I know you've lost a lot, but what do you still have that no one can take? What do you still have that no one can take? And the answer to that question has to at least include the destiny that God has for us.
Wow.
He has a destiny. So let's latch on to that. Cancer took your health. The bad economy took your job, and that's terrible. But you know what? Nobody can take your destiny. You're still God's child. You're still bound for heaven. Hang on to that. Nobody can touch that.
All right, let me take a break. We are with Max Lucado today, and one of the premier authors of our day, and his latest book, You'll Get Through This, and we got some great questions for him coming up in just a few moments.
Hi, I'm Daniel, and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're back with Max Lucado and his new book, You'll Get Through This, Hope and Help for Your Turbulent Times. There's a picture of it. Let me encourage you to check it out at Evangel or the discount bookstore there in Jacksonville, online at Barnes & Noble, or online at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And it's a great resource. And Max, you said in your book, and only you could say this and get away with it, you say a lot of things that a lot of people wish they could say. But you said that God's deliverance in the Bible is like a Mardi Gras. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, bold, brassy, and everywhere, if I remember correct. And it is. It is. Every time you turn the page, God is getting somebody through something. Got Abraham through old age. He got Jacob through his own deceit. He got Joshua out of the wilderness into the promised land. Moses through the Red Sea. Jonah through the whale. Even the story of Jesus is the story of deliverance, right? Jesus placed on the cross, but he got through the sin. He got through death. God is a God who gets people through things. He doesn't leave us in the valley of the shadow of death, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow. So this is a constant theme in the Bible. That is, though times are tough today, God will get me through it. Now, I'm very careful in the book, as you know, to point out, it may not be quick.
Yeah.
It may not be painless, but God can use this for something good. So in the meantime, don't be foolish. Don't take a short-term solution to a long-term problem. But don't despair either, because God is faithful, and he gets us through things.
I think that's one of the problems we have as believers. We'll read the Bible for encouragement. We'll flip through pages, and as we actually are flipping through decades.
Exactly. Yeah, you read through the story of Joseph. You could have read it this morning before breakfast. It doesn't take that long to read, about 20 chapters that tell the story of Joseph. Really, fewer chapters than that. But when you think about, the long walk from Canaan or Beersheba all the way down to Egypt, and how many days and months that might have taken, the days on the auction block, those years in Potiphar's house, those years in prison. I mean, he had a lot of days in which he was just struggling, just like we are, wondering how long is this going to last.
Why is it important, or maybe I should ask, why do Christians identify themselves with their problem, with their catastrophe or their tragedy, and they hold on to that more than they do getting through it and getting on the other side?
Well, I'm not sure I know why we do that, but I know we do. We identify ourselves, hey, I'm the orphan, or I'm the divorcee.
Yeah.
I'm the cancer patient.
Right.
Yes, yeah, I understand that. But much more important, you're a child of God. You are not what happens to you. You are who God says you are. Part of our healing is trusting God's voice over our voice and not allowing our tragedy to become our identity. Mm-hmm. Our tragedy can become our testimony. Boy, God got me through that divorce, or God got me through that debt. But we can't let our tragedy become our identity. In a morbid sort of way, sometimes we're so hungry for any identity that we're happy to be known as the one who has this problem. And that becomes comfortable. But God's destiny for us is that we be known as his children, not that we be known as our, misfits.
Often, and I know what people mean by this, and I've even been guilty of it myself. I've learned the hard way not to do this, but we say, all things work together for the good. We recite Romans 8:28, or we say, well, God's in control. Well, those are both true, but they may not be comforting at the moment. They may not be the words to say when somebody's in the midst of their life being turned upside down.
That's really the difficult thing about this whole process. How do you communicate a truth without it coming across as a platitude, without it coming across as flippant and insincere? And, my only response to that is it's a case-by-case basis. In some situations, people want to hear truth the second you open your mouth, They're so desperate for somebody to give them some hope. Other people are in such pain. The last thing they want and the last thing they can stomach is somebody coming in and saying, remember, all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to, so it's just a case-by-case thing. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a quick and easy rule of thumb. If I encourage people to do anything, I say, listen first, preach second. Just take a minute to take the temperature of the person you're with. But there are cases where they want you to speak truth into their life and need it desperately. But if they're not there yet, that's okay. Your presence, just being there, is a word of truth.
All right. I realize there's a lot of tragedies, from accidents to, cancer, illness, things like that. But then there's a lot of injustices. And I know that a lot of Christians are just flat angry because something happened to them or somebody did something to them. A good case is what happened to Joseph by his brothers. When he got through the other side, he had the perfect setup for revenge, but he chose not to go down that road. Can you speak to that?
I'm so glad you brought that up. I think that's one of the great parts of Joseph's story, and that is he ultimately forgave his brothers. Can you make note that I said ultimately? I don't think it was easy for him. When you read the story of Joseph, the brothers come to Egypt because of the famine, looking for food. They don't recognize Joseph. And Joseph didn't disclose his identity. This is just my own thinking here. But I think he didn't disclose his identity because he wasn't sure he could forgive these things. He lets them experience what he experienced. He puts them in jail for a time, the equivalent of a pit. He lets them feel rejection like he felt. And in some ways, it's like he wants to get even. But then finally, good wins out. Finally, he discloses who he is. He cries again. Joseph cries in this story, I think, 6 times. He's a crying guy. The most emotional one is when he says, I am Joseph. And the brothers can't believe it. They've not recognized the prince of Egypt as their brother. And he forgives them. He asks about Jacob. And it's one of the sweetest moments in the Bible. He had to do that to get through that. He really did. Had he never forgiven his brothers, he would have maybe lived in the palace, but he would have lived in anger. Part of healing is forgiving. It's tough, but it's essential.
All right. Where does confession coming into healing? I mean, it could be the mess that somebody's in is self-caused, and they just need to kind of confess it and ask God to help them.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes a confession comes in because we just need to be honest with God about how we feel. Part of the teaching in the book is under the theme, pray your pain out. When you're passing through a tough time, it's not a good time to keep everything in. It's a good time to get everything out to God, not always to get it out to people because people don't quite understand what you're going through. God always understands what you're going through. So if you're going through a tough time, pray it out. Confess what you've done. If you're the one who caused the pain, you just don't hold anything back. You let God know. Or if you are a victim of pain, if somebody else was driving the car, somebody else run the economy, then you let God know. If you're upset, it's better to shake a fist at God than to turn your back on God. He doesn't mind it if you shake a fist at him. I mean, there's a book in the Bible called Lamentations. For that reason, the whole book's dedicated to Jeremiah's complaints. It doesn't bother God. So just shake a fist at him. That's okay.
What do you think about the index card size plan? What do you mean by that?
Well, the way that Joseph guided the people through the famine, his solution was so practical. We're going to save up for 7 years of feast. During the feasts, during the good years, and during the bad years, we will distribute what we collected in the good years. The reason I put that in the book is because when we pass through a crisis, we need a plan. We don't need anything super complicated. He could put his on an index card. And so when people are passing through a tough time, a very practical thing to do is create an index card size plan. What are 3 things you can do today? Well, I can see if they're hiring at the Burger King. I can prepare a resume. I can network with people who are looking for employees. Instead of getting depressed that you've lost your job, come up with a plan. 3, 4 things you can do, put them on an index card, tape that to your mirror, to your refrigerator, and you'll already begin the healing process because you'll have something tangible you can do. Again, the war is against despair. We're trying to battle despair. How do you battle despair? Well, you create hope by developing a plan.
All right, the book is called You'll Get Through This, and Hope and Help for Your Turbulent Times by New York Times best-selling author Max Lucado, and I'm sure you've read some of his books in the past. I loved your Grace book, Max. It was just terrific, and thank you for doing it. My last question is, what would you say to somebody in the middle of their crises, their tough time? They would say to you, Pastor Max, I just don't think I can make it one more day.
then I would say, could you make it 1 more minute? 5 more minutes?
Mm-hmm.
You know, just hang in there. I would say what we've already said. I would say, what do you have that you've never lost, that no one can take? I would urge them to look for something for which to be grateful. I would ask them to reconsider their view of God, because anybody who says that is seeing God as a small God who does not have the ability to get them through it. So I would, you know, just give enough hope, do my best to give them just enough hope. What we're trying to do is change the mindset from despair to hope.
Mm-hmm.
And in speaking that hope into someone's life, it's a gift. When you can bring hope into someone's life, you're just giving them a wonderful.
Well, you're an inspiration and delight. What's next for you? Are you working on something new? Can you share with us?
Yeah. Let's see. I finished a book on prayer that will be next year's book.
Mm-hmm.
It's called The Pocket Prayer. It's a prayer for people who struggle to pray. I'm working on some fiction things right now. I wrote a book called Christmas Cross that's going to come out as a movie at Christmas. And we're really excited about that. I think that's going to be fun. So anyway,
Well, come to Oregon. We'll let you catch some big salmon.
That'd be great. Thank you. That would be fun. Maybe some.
Okay. Thanks, Mac. God bless you, friend. What a delight to have you today.
Thank you. All the best.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Well, welcome back. Always a delight to have Dave Dotterer with us in the studio. And today he is with us in a little bit different capacity because he has officially announced that he's running for the Oregon State Senate from Southern Oregon. And so we welcome you. But before that, you had a unique job. You were kind of like the liaison between the House and the Senate during the budget issues.
That's correct.
We had the special session. I had you in before the special session, and you were a little upset what probably wouldn't happen. It has now occurred. What do you think happened?
Well, first off, it was unnecessary because a special session is designed for a crisis. We didn't have a crisis. Mm-hmm. These were issues that were, frankly, left over from the regular session. Right. And that's not the way the Oregon Constitution is written. I get it. He's the Kitzhaber is the governor. He gets to call this. Yeah. The Democrats are in charge. That's the way it works. But you didn't really need a special session. You should have taken care of these issues. For example, the Republican tax issue with the reform for small businesses, that was put on the table in March. You know, they had months to work on that. And I've heard people say, well, we ran out of time, it was too complicated. No, they didn't. Yeah. They just didn't, you know, it got stonewalled and then it came back on. So,
well, a couple things came out of this. First of all, the layman's interpretation was they wanted to do something with PERS. And the offset of that was, you give us a few more taxes, we'll consider maybe a cap on PERS. At least that was the perception. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets up there, and there was no agenda. They twiddled their thumbs for the first day. How dangerous was that? I thought the governor made a deal.
He did make a deal. Here, the way this went down was there was a deal that was made between the leaders on both parties and the governor. So the five of them essentially sat down and they had a deal. And then I get an email Saturday night. Monday's the get together, and we get an email on Saturday night at like 6 o'clock and said deal's off. So we're all going, okay, do we go or do we not go? So we went, and then the discussions were, you know, is it back on? Is it not? And so, and I don't know what happened on the Democratic side, but
who rejected it? Was it?
Well, it was the answer was that Speaker Kotek, Tina Kotek, there were some issues that she wasn't willing to go this far, and so therefore the deal collapsed. Well, then they came back and said, okay, we've reconsidered. And so the deal was back on again. There were some more negotiations, some toing and froing and back and forth. And quite frankly, that's where you got the GMO bill. And remember, you heard about this.
Where did the GMO thing come from?
I can tell you.
I mean, you're up there for PERS and taxes, then all of a sudden GMO's a part of the mix.
I can tell you how that happened. What happened was the Republicans kept pushing for more PERS reform because they wanted more PERS, and the Democrats weren't willing to give it to them. And so finally, the Republicans, and I disagree with them folding, but okay, they did, and they said, yeah, but you got to give us something here for this. Okay, if you're going to go with less PERS reform, you got to give us something. So being good negotiators, they went to the top of the list of what was on their list, which was next, and that was the GMO bill. They put the GMO bill on the table. So if you're a GMO person, essentially the Democrats threw you under the table.
Wow.
Because the way you got to look at it was, because I talked to the Republican negotiator, he said, you know, if the Democrats had given us this amount of PERS savings, we would have taken GMO off the bill, off the docket.
Okay.
They didn't do it, so the Republicans left it on there, and we are where we are, and that's how GMO got into the mix. You open up negotiations, and that's where you are.
All right, let's backtrack on this. Let's do one at a time. What happened with PERS? What was the final outcome?
Let me say this very emphatically.
Yeah.
They didn't fix PERS.
Okay.
Did I make my point? They didn't fix PERS, Barry.
Okay,
They did not. They did not. They made an incremental improvement to it. They took a second, if you will, a second small bite at the apple, but 2 small bites equal still PERS light. It's still, so they really didn't address it. So again, that's the most important piece.
What happened with taxes?
Taxes. What they did was the Democrats wanted to increase taxes on wealthy people. That's their agenda, and so they took the senior medical deduction, and they now means tested it, and the senior medical deduction into the future is going to be quite a drain, and so it's the more wealthy seniors that are not going to be getting the deduction, and then they did the same thing with some of your exemptions, over 200,000 and those kinds of things and then what the Republicans insisted on though was, now wait a minute. We'll go along with this tax increase. We're philosophically against this, but we have this system where our small businesses are taxed at the individual tax rate, and that's not right. What we've got is small businesses are being taxed at a higher rate than the corporations.
Wow.
So what they did was they said to put this on the table that, look, if you're a small business, S Corp, LLC, and you file your taxes a certain way, you can separate out your business income, and it'll get taxed at a lower rate. But of course, your personal income will still say, like, you and I have to pay our taxes. And this was monumental. We've never done that, and as far as we know, no state has ever done this before. So this is really this is significant. It really was. And so, again, I thought it was a good idea.
A good idea, and it got through.
It got through, yes.
Okay. And what was the outcome of GMOs? I mean, what happened there?
With the GMO, what you ended up with was a bill that said that the regulation of GMO will happen at the state level. In other words, it cannot happen at the local level because this is a state and federal issue. They have the ability to look at this, with the exception of the one compromise was Jackson County. And because Jackson County already has a ballot measure on the docket and everything, they exempted Jackson County. That was, again, one of the things that was negotiated. And there were people who said, it ought to be statewide, and some people said, then there were people in Eugene who were pushing, well, let Lane County get out of this too, just like, So again, that's where the negotiation
So is this the Obamacare of agriculture? There are exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, But again, you get into the sausage making.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with a special session. You have this very, very truncated piece, and I can tell you, then they nominally, quote, held hearings. Those were it was like a show trial.
Yeah.
People showed up, and that's the problem with a special session. You don't go through the normal legislative. You're in a hurry, you got to get out of here, you can't, and then you start to cut deals like, we got to, by midnight tonight we have to have a deal. Well, okay, is that the best way to make policy and legislation.
All right. Now, let's go political. We've got the 2014 elections coming up. Obviously, you're an announced candidate. You're in the middle of that. As far as you know, you're running unopposed in the primary at this point.
Correct.
You'll be up against Alan Bates. Has he announced?
He has. He's announced. And he's filed.
So he's in. So, all right. So the two of you will be primarily running against each other in the general. Now, with the special session and PERS not getting fixed, and maybe a little bit of a win on the tax issue, at least for the individual corporate rates, what do you think the hot button in Oregon going into a primary? I mean, how can the conservatives win?
Well, I think the conservatives can win on the fact that we did push through this tax reform. I mean, this is huge. Nothing was, we've talked about this in the past, nothing was done in the regular session to help business. Yeah. Nothing was done to help business and to help jobs in the economy. This can be a significant improvement. So that, and the other piece that I think is really important is, again, I said it twice, PERS was not fixed. The legislature punted. They had everybody was on board to say,
but isn't that a win for the Democrats? I mean, they can use that with the unions and everything else.
Sure, they can. Of course, they can. And but you asked how the conservatives can win, and the point is that the conservatives need to say, look, you had a legislature that clearly knows we have a problem here. They couldn't pull the trigger. They couldn't do the right thing, which was to fix PERS, and they got whittled down and whittled down. And we have nominally this idea that, well, we addressed PERS. I've heard people say that. Well, we addressed PERS. Okay, that's not saying we fixed it. Note the wordsmithing. We addressed it. No, did you fix it? That's the question. And so, and I think there's still the issues that you really see. We know that with Obamacare, there's issues out there, and we know that that has going to have a significant impact on the Oregon health plan and what we're doing here in this state. And we know that, I mean, again, I've mentioned this in the past, I've seen the numbers from the Oregon Health Authority, and when you start to get out to the end of this decade, we've got some big budget gaps that right now we're not sure how to fill them. Now, so
if by chance the Obamacare ends up being shelved, now we had on this news this morning of all of the stuff that's been going on with Obamacare, only 51,000 people got through nationwide, and even then they don't know what they got yet. All right, let's just hypothetically say it doesn't get fully implemented for whatever reason. What does that do to the Oregon Health Plan? Well,
wow, first off, Oregon has put together some good pieces in that for these coordinated care organizations. Those are innovative ideas that were, in fact, that were pushed by some of the conservatives, saying, this is a way to save some money. I think my biggest concern would be, I was talking about the fact that we have this out to the end of the decade, we have these budgetary issues with it. Well, even with those budgetary issues, they're predicated on the federal government's going to keep us giving all this money, and they're giving us extra money right now. People don't realize this. The only reason we're able to do this is the governor went to President Obama and got $2 billion, $1.9 billion extra for the next few years to tie us over. Well, that's going to run out.
Yeah. Well, Dave, you're in the race. How people get a hold of you? Want to know more about your campaign?
I already have a website up, DaveDotterer.com, and we're working on bringing that up more. And there's
DaveDotterer.com. So check that out. And your district takes in Ashland, parts of Medford, where?
And out into the Applegate and Jacksonville and out there.
Right, so,
all right, so the southern half of Jackson County.
Southern half of Jackson County. So check it out, DaveDotterer.com. Keep up the good work. See you next time, okay?
Yes,
and we'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.